Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there, a very good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsline, coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Of course, as you can see, your usual and favorite host for our Advocata is out for the day. I'm Sharlan Benedict and I'll be sitting in for him today. Of course, many people are talking about the new lane law system that has been introduced. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it that simple? Recently, after the lane law system was introduced, of course, this morning while I was scrolling through my social media feed, I saw the same image being taken and reproduced, interpreted in different ways, of course, probably reflecting the political inclinations of those who shared it. But, of course, at the end of the day, this really affects the lives of the people here in Sri Lanka, and in turn, it affects the economy. And to discuss these matters and more, of course, we've got in our studios the Chief Operating Officer of Advocata, Dhananath Fernando. Dhananath, a very good evening and welcome to the show.
Very good evening, Sharlan. Thank you.
Dhananath, how was your ride from Moratuwa to our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo? You experienced this, didn't you?
It has always been congested, Sharlan, as usual. So, of course, I travel in the Gaul route, so
okay.
It's generally very difficult to commute from. I travel from Panadura, so it's a bit of a very long ride. It takes about 90 minutes. Even if I leave at about 6:30 in the morning, it takes about approximately 90 minutes to come to.
So, Dhananath, without confining this to really a simple debate or an empty debate, should we have this lane law, should we not have this lane law, is it good, is it bad, let's focus a little bit more on the broader picture of this, because the transportation system in Sri Lanka, or the infrastructure that we have, not only in Sri Lanka, in any other country, contributes immensely to the economy of that country. It affects the human resources of the country, it affects the economy directly in many other ways. So this new system that has been introduced, what are the pros and what are the cons? I'm sure it has both.
Yes, Sharlan. First of all, I'm not a transportation economist or like a transportation expert, but I can share the economics behind the lane law. The reason why the problem, Sharlan, was that we had too many vehicles on the road, and we have been commuting vehicles instead of commuting people. So the solution that they brought out was, if you give a priority lane for buses which commutes more people, maybe around 30-40 people in one small space in the road, instead of because to bring that same 30 people in, you have to spend about 15 or 20 more other small vehicles. So actually your road get very congested of vehicles instead of commuting people. So the logic behind providing the priority bus lane was, so you are commuting people, and when the priority bus lane commutes faster, someone who comes in a vehicle have a motivation or incentive to keep their vehicle at home and shift that mode of transportation to public transportation, so they can commute faster, because the bus lane is the priority. So as a result, you have like a one less vehicle from like a small vehicle, and there will be people commuting more towards taking the buses. But to do that, the buses has to be timely and it has to be comfortable and convenient. So that was the logic behind the lane law, lane priority. It's all over the world. That has been the economics behind it. So you have more people using public transport, leaving their vehicles at home was the logic. So I'm not sure what was the logic behind when you allowed the same bus lane for three-wheelers and also the motorbikes. Because that means that you are congesting the bus lane, and that means there is no incentive for someone to keep their vehicle at home and shift their mode of transportation for public transportation, because that lane already get congested. So that's the economics behind it. And as you said, this is very important, because we spend a lot of money just combusting our valuable fossil fuel, which we import, spending our valuable US dollars, which we earn from foreign remittances and our exports, and we are just combusting over traffic. And you can see it during office hours. I need not to explain, everyone experiencing it.
Exactly.
Just the vehicle, that the traffic doesn't move, it's bump to bump, and you are just combusting your valuable fossil fuel, and it pollutes the environment, and there's a whole series of environmental repercussions.
So in Sri Lanka especially, it was the transition from, the laws that were on the road, where you can cross whenever you want, you don't have to use signal lights when you're changing lanes, from that kind of a law to a disciplined area like this. But of course, as you mentioned, the logic behind loving a bus priority lane, it's not just that the buses travel fast, is it? It's more, we need more, there must be people, if a person is traveling in a vehicle, they have a certain level of comfort that they experience. And definitely, I think you and I both, and even all our viewers out there can agree that we cannot get that kind of comfort, or even half of that, or even 1/10 of that comfort when we travel in a bus. What's the answer really to this?
Exactly, Sharlan. I think even the people who commute in their own private vehicles, they don't commute in their private vehicles, that not because that they like to do it, because they are also wasting their money, time and resources. But the problem is actually, if you are keeping your vehicle at home and changing your mode of transportation to public transportation, of course it has to be comfortable. The logic why our public transportation is so laid back is the route permit system. Now just take as an example this 138 route, the Pitakotua, the Kottava, Homagama, that route is supposed to be the highest number of buses that commutes.
Right.
But have you seen a proper luxury bus, I mean the air conditioned bus operating in that 138 route?
No.
No. And Homagama, Maharagama, Kottava, that area where the middle class lives, and those are the people who have their own private vehicles. If you go to the high level road during office hours, you can see they all put their vehicle into the road. So if you don't have an air conditioned bus route in that lane, how can you expect people to shift to public transport? So the need is, this route permit system has completely complicated and confused our transportation dynamics. So, and you won't believe, a route permit is more expensive than the bus. So it doesn't make any sense. Like I buy a bus that is also paying about, like, you know, enormous amount of tax.
Exactly.
You know, we and
200-300%.
Good 300%, 200%, and I register that bus, and I have to spend like about 3-4 times of the value of the bus to get the route permit. And even if I spend that amount, I may not be able to get a route permit, because that's a complete cartel. And some bus owners are pressuring the government to not to give extra route permits, because they are scared that the people, there will be more supply. But the problem is, when you have a increasing demand and we are short at supply, of course your service is, the quality of the service is going to deteriorate. So that's the problem what we see. And if you look at the main entry points to Colombo, the Gaul Road, the high level road where you live, like the Vattala, that Nigambo stretch, and the baseline road, all these areas, have you seen like a proper air conditioned bus service where people would like to pay extra? And these people are not asking to pay like the normal rate and trying to enter Colombo. They will pay like extra 100 rupees, 150 rupees just for commuting. But the problem is that service is no longer available. So that's the real problem. You have one end, you are not incentivizing for someone to move to the public transportation system, and on the other hand, you are not allowing the public transportation to increase their supply with a very complicated route permit system. And you can see the result, and of course we all experiencing it, and there are multiple environmental congestion. And I remember Professor Amal Professor Amal from the University of Moratuwa, Amal Kumara, gave us the expert on this transportation, and he has done an analysis. I think there's enormous amount of time, fuel, and road and the wear tear of tires and everything being wasted over the roads, which is a significant amount of our GDP.
Also, Dhananath, when we talk in terms of cash, that's when we all, the people, really understand what kind of an impact this is having to the economy. How does this directly affect the economy? Basically,
one thing is the productivity. Someone who comes on the public transport, either they are getting late to come to work, or by the time they reach to office, they are already tired. And also you are spending very unproductive time, because you can't really do any work. But if you have a comfortable seating arrangement and you have a comfortable internet connection, so actually you can work on the go. So actually someone who spends about 1 hour commuting one way, which is about 2 hours every day, so actually they can get some productive work done on their way, depending of course the job role.
Right.
But that impacts the entire economy across every sector, because as I said, we are importing fossil fuel, we are just combusting it on traffic. That the air quality, luckily we are still not bad as Delhi or our neighboring countries.
No, we were borderline though.
We are borderlining, yes, exactly. So we have compromised our air quality to an extent, and people are wasting time. By the time they come to work and they are going back home, they are tired, so their family lives have been affected, their work life has been affected. Ultimately, you have like a very tired, unsatisfied citizen who just spends time on the road, and that's completely the economy. And economy is the people who work, who contribute to the workforce, and they are pretty much unproductive.
Of course, so this issue is really such a broad issue that it affects people's lives on every aspect, even if it comes to work, the happiness of that person, the productivity of that person. And of course, it's important that the people really voice their concerns regarding these matters, because it's the lives of the people that they affect. Of course, Dhananath, your expertise is in the field of economy. We will get into an in-depth discussion about how the economy of Sri Lanka is really doing, especially with the limitation of the exports. Should we further limit exports? Should we allow these exports to come in? How is it really affecting our country? That discussion and more after this short commercial break.
Newsfirst, Newsline.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline on TV1. Now, as we promised before we crossed over to the commercial break, Dhananath, what is your take regarding the constricting Sri Lanka's imports? There were various opinions that were expressed. Of course, some members of the government said that for the first time in Sri Lanka, the exports of Sri Lanka surpassed the imports. First time in a long stretch of time that our exports surpassed our imports. Is this really a good policy for us to limit our exports to a point that we can, save up on foreign remittances, as you were speaking of before?
I understand the concern from the government's end, Sharlan, because with COVID, our remittances will drop, and our exports has bounced back, which is a positive sign. It's as before the COVID level, it's hitting about $1 billion every month for the last 2 months, so which is a positive sign. But the concern is we have a bullet payment to be done in October, which is about $1 billion and we have to pay about $3 billion as debt servicing, that is the interest, and our capital loans that we have taken as a repayment for the upcoming year. So we really need US dollars to servicing our debts. So because of that, we have a bit of a shortage in our foreign currency, or like the US dollars in common man's term. So when you have that sort of a crunch, that's maybe the reason why the government has taken like a very strict call on controlling imports. But the problem with controlling imports is, if you look at our import basket, about only 20% is consumable goods.
Right.
That means if you are importing, it could be a food item where you directly consume something, which is about 20% of our entire tradable consumable goods. The rest of the 80% is capital goods and intermediary goods. That means machinery, the intermediary goods for produced consumable goods, or for produced goods to export are being imported. Now if you look at the garments sector, the apparel sector, they import yarn, they import buttons, they import plastic, they import machinery, but they add the value and they export. So I think they import about $3 billion and they convert it at another $3-4 billion and export for about $7-8 billion. So without that 3 billion or 4 billion imports, actually you can't export that 8 billion. So as a policy, government has allowed the raw materials for exports to be imported. But the problem is, when you restrict imports, it affects the entire economy. For an example, look at this operation, the studio operation. The cameras, the wires, the microphones, this technical capital equipment that you have to import. If one camera doesn't work, you have to probably get a camera which is of the same quality, which you need import to run this operation.
And they're not produced in the country.
Exactly, and that you produce the news for the country, and that pays the salaries, and there's a ripple down effect. So when you control imports, that has a sequence of ripple effects on the entire economy. You are distorting the market, and that you will feel after some time. I'll give you a classic example. Now there was a big concern from the poultry farmers and the bakeries to increase the prices, because the egg prices shot up with import control. So you may be wondering like how come the poultry products and the bakery products are going to increase with the import controls.
Okay.
This is basically the maize or in Sinhala terms we call badairingu, is we are producing maize, but a majority or like the greater degree is imported because we can't match the demand. Local demand. But this maize has been used as the main source, as the food source for the poultry industry.
Right.
So when you have higher prices in maize, your poultry products prices goes up. When your poultry product prices goes up, your egg prices, your chicken prices goes up. That has an effect on the bakery products. So when you have an effect on the bakery prices, that affects bread prices, your cost of living affects. And when you have a higher cost of living, your labor prices goes up. When your labor prices goes up, most of the value additions we do in apparel sector is as labor.
Right.
But it will take a little time to affect this, to feel that impact.
Right.
But this is going to affect the entire economy. So the next question would be, okay, if you don't have the dollars, how are you going to import? How are you going to pay? So that's why this balance of payment issue, there has to be a separate series of actions to be taken, where you have to negotiate with your bilateral creditors, or you have to go for a moratorium with your creditors, and there has to be a separate series of actions that you need to do. Or do you have to negotiate a IMF bailout program, and you revamp the exports. So there's a separate series of actions that you need to take to manage this situation. But it will be long run, and people are, I think, tired of waiting and seeing for long run solutions. So I think government has a strict control, but personally and as an institute, and I think on economics, this will have harder repercussions longer run, and that has already been felt. Now if you go to buy a phone charger, you may not be able to find as you expected, and the computer prices, the electronic prices have gone up. And when you have like a computer prices or an electronic prices going up, that will affect like when you are replacing your capital equipment. At the moment, I think we are running on stocks because we had adequate stocks, and now you can replace it, but already the prices have gone up, and that will indicate on the prices in exports as well. So my worry is, I hope that it won't happen. I wish I would be wrong, but this if our exports become uncompetitive, then our exports will also start declining.
Our revenue will come down.
Our revenue will come down. That would be a serious implication. So that's my really worry. By controlling imports, are we going to hit our exports? But then the next question, how to solve it, that requires a different sequences or series of actions to overcome it.
So this is a similar scenario to the hole in the bucket. You go around and you come to the same place. But speaking of the increase in electronics prices, like, isn't that a global issue? Hasn't since the global market was so ruptured because of the COVID-19 virus, prices went up? Is it really a direct impact of the import restrictions?
There are two sides. There is already like a breakage of the supply chain. So when you have like a supply issue, of course the prices will go up. And on top of that, when you have an import control, now imagine if you know that no longer that you can import TVs, refrigerators or computers, what would be the normal seller at a shop would do at, let's say, Unity Plaza, who's selling a computer? Definitely they are going to increase the price. So the impact would be, so you are going to buy a computer, now you are paying an extra price which you could have spent somewhere else.
Right.
Because now you have to spend for 150,000 for a computer, which earlier it could have been 100,000. You are spending this 50,000 which you could have spent for something else. It could be on books, it could be on your education. So now actually you are cutting down your education expense to buy a computer. So that means people in the education sector is going to affect from your cutting down of the expenditure.
Right.
It's not only you, I will do it, and when the entire community does it, that is going to affect the education sector. You get what I'm saying? So it's interconnected, the economy is interconnected, and one shock will have like a ripple effect. Of course, I agree there's an issue in the supplies and in the global supply chain, but there are more reasons with import controls coming in.
Dhananath, the people who are looking at these import restrictions more positively, of course, say that this is a good opportunity for Sri Lankans to step up to the plate, for Sri Lankans to start producing their own items, things that we import now. For example, the State Pharmaceutical Corporation announced a program, New Country, New Medicine, where they plan on producing one new drug every month, and of course these will be added on as they go on. That would otherwise have to be imported into the country. So already for the past 8 months or so, they have produced 15 drugs. Isn't this really an opportunity for Sri Lankans to step up to the plate and start, revamping our production sector?
Sharlan, I think Sri Lankans already always have an opportunity, because imagine just because of cutting the imports, okay, now people can locally produce it, but it also has to be competitive. Now imagine if I am getting like one pill importing, which cost me 2 rupees, and if I produce it locally, it should be we should be able to produce it at 2 rupees, and if all less. But the problem is, if you are producing at 2 rupees, or even if it's less, definitely I will buy the local product, right? I won't buy the imported one.
Right.
So anyway, the imported won't have an impact, because if it's competitive, I will buy it. But the problem is if it's not competitive, so then the import cost, I have to spend 2 rupees, but for buying the local product, if I have to spend 5 rupees, that means our products are not competitive enough. So the important thing is, I think, for the government sector and the local producers not to just produce, but to produce competitively, because this game is like playing a World Cup, Charlotte. Because winning a World Cup, you can't say just because of India didn't participate in the World Cup, we won the World Cup. Right? It's a competitive game. India has to come, Sri Lanka has to come, we have to play together, and we have to win against India. And that's what you call winning a World Cup. And if you are really winning, becoming like an export hub for pharmaceutical, if you are really competing, of course our prices have to be competitive with the world prices, because otherwise how are we going to export? Because just because we are having an import restriction, it doesn't mean India having an import restriction.
Right.
They are having an export restriction on onions. So because they can't match their own demand
from overseas.
So the ideally what we have to do is we have to produce it competitively, where then we can compete also in the export market, and people will of course prefer a local product if it's good quality, if it's lower in price, and if it can even sometimes people will prefer a local product even at a higher price if it's good and productive. But what we experience is generally when you give like a bigger protection, there is a lot of inefficiencies and rent seeking coming in. Just because of a political connection I have, I say, okay sir, you have this import control, and I become a monopoly, so I become like producing manufacturer of this pharmaceutical, it could be anything, for the entire Sri Lanka, and I can't compete, and the consumer has to pay an extra price just because of the inefficiency.
And that's not the desired result that we're looking for.
Exactly.
Dhananath, it was a very insightful conversation. Of course, when speaking about matters of the economy, we can go on and on for days, in fact, but unfortunately, our show Newsline is restricted to 30 minutes. And of course, thank you very much, Dhananath, for coming on our show, despite your busy schedule, and educating, of course, the general public on matters that affect us all. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there, of course, our ardent fans who tune in every day at 8:30 to watch Newsline. Of course, until we meet you next time, take care and God bless.